And this was a really big move for Richie because he wants to keep playing. He also recognizes the importance of playing because that just makes him better for the national team. So let's talk about the national team right now, because the next tournament coming up for them, CONCACAF Nations League, first game goes June 15th. They've made the Final Four. That's happening in Vegas, and they're going to announce their Nations League roster Wednesday morning. So let's have a little bit of fun here, shall we? Before that whole announcement gets made, Wheels. I'm gonna start with you on this, and let's start from the back, and then we'll move our way out. So when it comes to final spots for defenders, who do you think should get it? Hiebert, Zator, Waterman, McNaughton.
Okay, I was putting together my team, so I think the three goalkeepers are settled: Borje,
Yes,
Sinclair, McGill, and then so that's why this is a decent question about defenders. It looks like Derek Cornelius perhaps came down with an injury, so that would rule him out. So I think there might be room for two of those players. Johnston Miller, Vittoria Kennedy are all locks, and I think based upon how much they've been playing and how they've been playing, probably Hiebert and Zator would be the players that probably come into this team. Both of them were at the last or with Canada during the last window. Hiebert's playing 90 minutes a game, starting for a very good St. Louis side, continues to play towards the left-hand side as well. You might need him to provide a little bit of coverage in that area with Cornelius out. And Zator coming off a really solid season in Poland. I think he's turned some eyes. I think he'd be the player that would come in. I think that he was probably earmarked for just the Gold Cup. But if Cornelius goes down, then he might get shifted into this competition. So out of that group that you listed, I think that Hiebert and Zator would have the edge. Waterman, McNaughton, close knocking on the door, but maybe just not quite there yet. And I think that Zach McGraw, a player that was named to the Canadian Gold Cup provisional roster, I think will absolutely be part of the Gold Cup. He just didn't declare for Canada in time to play this tournament, or he would be ahead of all those four players. So I think it's going to be Hiebert and Zator. That would be my guess.
Interesting. Jordo, you have any opinions on that?
I'm not in my head, Wheels, because I just love when we're on the same page, buddy. I love when I love it. I love it. I don't have to argue. I don't have to be like, but Wheels, I disagree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And what I will say is just about form. Hiebert, from the start of the MLS season, you're like, this guy kind of popped up. But if you're looking at him before, you know that he was for St. Louis too, and he was doing well. But it's different when you can come into MLS with the big boys and play week in and week out and do bits. That helps. Then Zator, he's the guy for the CPL. Everyone would talk about, would probably say the best defender. It's different. You go to Europe now. I think it's helped him go into a land that he knows, Poland, speaks the language, a place he always wanted to play, but he's playing and contributing. I think what's also helping him as well is that he's showing his versatility in the CPL. He's playing center back well week in and week out. Now sometimes he's playing right back. You can see him in different positions. I know he can play with three in the back. He's versatile. You know what you're going to get. I think John Herdman and him will really will really merge heads and really get along with each other, because he's just a student of a game, Zator. So I'm going with those two. Waterman, I think obviously we know his quality, but I just don't think he's been performing to the level that you would need to going into this camp.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, Joel Waterman, there were some injuries, but it doesn't matter. I mean, this is somebody who got called into camp and then was named to the World Cup roster. But you're right, he was dealing with some injuries there. So didn't play for a little bit. McNaughton, while he seems to have found his groove with Nashville, I just don't know if he's played enough. So he definitely seems to have been revived in going on over to Nashville. But, I wonder if we will see all of them regardless, because as we now know, and, was confirmed by Herdman, he is probably going to have a completely different set of players for Nations League versus Gold Cup. So we'll see.
Well, I'm of the understanding. I'm going to be I'm of the understanding, being reliably informed, that the group that goes to the Gold Cup, there's going to be a core of the group from the Nations League that's also going to play in the Gold Cup. So it's not going to be a completely different side. There will be a core group that will be playing in both competitions.
Okay, so core like 5 from Nations League are then going to make their way over?
I think more than that.
Yeah, more? Okay.
5 of the 23, a core group. I think that means more than half.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, what does core mean, right? Because already...
the whole idea of like young players coming, some players might not be able to play because of transfers or fitness or what have you. But the time for young players or new players to get a look with this Canada side, that have something to prove will be in September and the fall months when there will be friendlies announced. Like, that is the time. Canada wants to win these two competitions, especially the Nations League, but at the very least, they want to be competitive for Gold Cup. And that means that some of these experienced players, established Canadian men's national team players, will play in both tournaments. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's move to the midfield now. And who do you think would get that spot? Latour, Kay, Witherspoon, or Choinière? Jordo, I begin with you.
So I'm going to change your question and just change one word. Please, Chills. We've been going at this for a while now. Can I please just change one word?
I'm going to take an awkward sip. Go.
Instead of get, I'm going to change the word to deserve. And that is Choinière. Is that okay? Thanks.
No, fine.
Choinière, he has to. Look, it's not his age is right, 24. The way that he's performing week in and week out, the way that he can fit and mold into Herdman's system. It's not like you have to play him at center mid. He could do a shift in different positions. Like, if you're talking about if he's on the wing or if he's playing like a 10, he could play in the middle. Put him in, man. He's playing quality football. I think he deserves it. So I won't say get the opportunity. He deserves to be there. And John Herdman, if you want to hire me for your staff of who I think, I'll just always talk to you and whisper in your ear. You could disagree, but Choinière, for sure for me. He should be a shoo-in.
Herdman's coaching staff isn't small. There might be room for you in the small army of people that help out with that team.
Disciples.
Yes. So I have Davies and Adekubi on the left-hand side, Buchanan and Larea on the right. That's hybrid. I guess I'm calling them midfielders rather than defenders. But in the central midfield, that's where I think you have a decision to make. And I only think that there's only room for one of those players out of the four that you named. Eustáquio, Atiba, Osorio, Kone are absolutely in. It could be two of those players if Aidan Morris chooses not to play for Canada. That decision has not been made, as at least I haven't been informed that it's made, but John Herdman wants him on this list. He will be named to this team, is whether he accepts the call to Canada or not, which means that someone's going to be missing out here. And the player that I add on deserving it would be Victor Latour. Over the rest. I think Choinière is going to be more of a Gold Cup addition to this team. Latour, again, was in the last Canada camp, is coming off a difficult season with his club team for Ross County, not because of the way that he played, just the team battling relegation, going through the relegation playoffs, some difficult games, some difficult times, but I think he's worth a shot. He's still a good player at a young age. I think it's a good mix there, maybe adds a little bit more legs to some of the experience in that position as well. Mark-Anthony Kaye, for me, just doesn't deserve to be there based upon the way that he's been playing. I mean, if you want to send a message, whether it's players who have been, around for quite some time or players that have been playing themselves into the team, his standard with TFC this year has been up and down, to say the least. Witherspoon, again, a guy that's put in a shift and been willing to come and play for this country. It just depends like where Herdman wants to go. I can see him bringing Kaye. I can see him bringing Witherspoon, both of them. But for me, based on the way that things have played out, I think Latour would be my pick of the bunch.
Can we just talk about a time right now quickly that when you're looking at this Canadian team and you're thinking of the ebbs and flows in Nations League and Gold Cup, and you're like, well, this guy could be a guy. This guy could be a guy. It's a beautiful time in Canadian soccer. I'm so excited because before this wasn't the case. 10 years ago, this was not the case. Now it's like you're looking around. And you're
Jordo, what you're saying now, I was saying that during World Cup qualifying because especially during World Cup qualifying, they still had Gold Cups they had to play in, and Herdman was changing his roster all the time, sometimes out of necessity because of injuries, because certain players came down with COVID. And it was amazing me, the amount of depth. And also, and I used to have this number off the top of my head. I know at the time it was 7. I have a feeling it's grown, but Herdman had also convinced 7 players who were dual nationals to represent Canada. Right. Like he's a great salesman, but B, I think he's also shown them, the quality of this program. And then it's very easy to say, hey, you get to play with guys like Davies and David and Eustáquio, and then you got Kone coming through. Right. So there's a youth movement. So know that this team should be competitive for years to come. Obviously, we know the ultimate goal being 2026 World Cup. So speaking of Davies and David, let's move to the front, shall we? And Kyle Larin, who is the leading goal scorer for the men's national team. Who do you think should get some final spots for the attackers here, Wheels? Cavallini, Brim, or Ugbo?
This is the toughest one for me. because Larin, David, and Hoylett, I'm putting Hoylett as an attacker, even though he can play behind. Those three for me are locks, which only leaves one space on the team. And obviously Davies can push forward. Tajon can push forward. He uses a number of different players in those positions as well. I think Liam Miller just misses out. I think he might be more of a Gold Cup player. I think he goes with Charles Andreas Brim. And I know that maybe isn't what Canadian soccer fans want to hear. Cavallini's been playing a bit down in Mexico, scored a couple goals in Liga MX. He's been doing okay. Ike Ugbo, I don't think he's scored for the last 3 or 4 months. Like, it's been a little bit of a struggle for Ugbo, although he started to play a little bit more over the last little bit. I know Brim has been playing in the second division of Dutch football, but he scored like 11 or 12 goals on this season. And he kept it going after he made the Canada squad last time out. There's something about him that John Herdman really likes. His profile, he's done well for his club. And I think that Herdman's a guy going into tournaments, wants a player who's on good form for his club side. So I think that Brim might get that last spot, but you can certainly make the case for either Cavallini, Ugbo, or Liam Miller to go on and pick up a spot as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I was looking at this Wheels, it was tough. My hands were tied as well. And what I came up with was you're looking at personnel versus potential. So for me, potential is Brim in terms of his age, the way he's playing. I know he's playing, as you said, second division, but he's scoring. And you're like, this guy could be something. And then when I say personnel and Ugbo, why I'm going to choose him, because I know we got to pick a side now. You don't stay on the fence. I'm just going to pick him off of personnel, like what he brings when he does plays. Yes, he hasn't scored, but in terms of like his physicality, maybe trying something new, a different type of player up top, a guy to maybe complement David, or if you're playing with two, whatever it might be. But it's tough. But again, I think this is a beautiful thing that we're talking about. There's one spot we're potentially talking about. There's two guys I'd be happy to see play. But yeah, I think in that position, Herdman it's a tall order because you got to figure out what you're trying to do. And I said personnel against potential, but maybe he has something totally different. But I would pick Ugbo though.
Yeah, and one of those players needs to start, performing for Canada. Cavallini's been the guy in the past, but he hasn't played a whole lot for Canada over the last year and a half. So there's certainly a job to be grabbed there. I know that Dan Jebison, Sheffield United, is being named to Canada's Gold Cup provisional roster. I'd be interested to see if he ends up perhaps committing to Canada later on this summer. I'm not sure it was in his original plan, but he was playing for England under 20s, finishing off his youth career playing for England, and they got knocked out early of the under 20 World Cup. So perhaps that gives him enough time off between competitions. He comes in, plays for Canada at the Gold Cup, and he might be the ready-made option. I want to see one of these players step up, Andy, and take the role, because David and Larin, yeah, they're great. They can step out and play all the time, but when they're not available, you need some more ready-made options in that position for me. Where are the goals going to come from against top teams? And you want to have that kind of depth. So I think it's an open race, and one of these players needs to step up and take it.
Yeah, and going back to that whole theme of depth, and you have all these players, Canadian players around the world who are getting minutes and scoring goals. First of all, scoring goals isn't easy. You would hope that would also motivate some other players. And it's also tough to make the national team. I mean, Jordo, you and I, when we had Jacob Schaffelberg on the show on One Nation, that was earlier in the season. He came out of the gates flying for Nashville, now hasn't scored since end of April. So it's like, you got to keep that consistency going if you want to be somebody, who's up front. So you see how tough it is. But I don't know. Ayo Akinola, this is somebody who got called into camp, but his form just hasn't been there with Toronto FC either. So will he be able to regain that? Because Wheels, Herdman does have options.
Yeah, you said Akinola. That was a guy that you looked at, but based upon his form, I just can't see how you can name him to the team. Same thing for Daniil Henry. His name jumped out when the preliminary Nations League roster came out, and you're like, yeah, everyone loves Daniil, universally loved, but he hasn't played. And now doesn't have a team. He's been let go by Minnesota United. What have you said, Andy and Jordan? I think you both said it. You just need to play football. You need to play regular football at the highest level possible. And if you're not, there's more than enough competition now for those spots that someone will be able to take it from you.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking forward to CONCACAF Nations League. Again, that tournament will be right here on One Soccer.